Okay. Yeah, so they were pretty smart about this. But this is pretty simple code, isn't it? Inside of this data access application block. This is something that you could have written. All right, but the nice thing is you can just use it. Okay, it's just here. Anybody here who's not using SQL Server? Okay, what are you using? Oracle. Okay, and I know, Linda, you're using Oracle. Yeah. Okay, I feel sorry for you, but that's okay. We all have to do that, you know. Unfortunately, we have to use Oracle too sometimes, but you know, actually using Oracle's fine as long as you don't have to use any of their tools, right? Okay, good. So a lot of different variations on this, right? I mean, the idea is to show you what's available with all of this. Doing the scalar. Okay, same thing, right? You got to set up a command object, create a new connection, open the connection, set the command text, and then you can finally run the execute scalar method to get back the value you want. Okay? So again, using SQL Helper, they really do help us quite a bit. Look at that. I cut down quite a bit of code out of that one, didn't I? Updating data. Let's take a look at what it takes to update data then. Because not only do you use ADO.NET to insert or to retrieve data, but you're also probably going to use it to modify data. So in this case, I'm doing something very simple, and I have a sample coming up of stored procedures as well, where I'm going to update products, set the product name equal to, you know, whatever, where the product ID is equal to 1. Okay. Build a new command object, build a connection object, open the connection, set the command text. Boy, does this get monotonous or what? Now you can see why you wrap this stuff up. Then you do the execute non-query. Command.execute non-query. Okay, close the connection, boom, you're out of there. Okay, let's take a look at updating it through the SQL Helper. Okay, build your update statement, do the execute non-query. Okay, really nice. Okay. All right, our next example then, how do we use it with stored procedures? Again, that's one of the overloads that we have is the ability to pass in a stored procedure name, okay, with parameters. You can also do output parameters. So the data access application block does have full support for stored procedures. That includes both input parameters and output parameters. Okay, so you can do either one. They also have a neat thing, which I'm not going to show here, but they also have the ability to discover the parameters that are in a stored procedure, all right, and then cache those parameters as well. They'll give you back all of the parameters in a parameter array of SQL parameter objects. Then you can cache them wherever you want to cache them, right? If you're on a desktop app, you might put them in some sort of global class somewhere. If you're on a web application, maybe you're going to stick them into the cache object or the session object or whatever's appropriate for you. Okay, but you can do that. You can set up an array of cache objects. Why do we do that? It just makes things a little bit quicker, doesn't it? Okay. Now, I do want to warn you, I would prefer that you set up the parameters yourself. Don't go out and do one of those discovery methods, because that does force it to go down and read the metadata from SQL Server. And that is an expensive operation. Okay, so you might want to stay away from that particular method there. So again, if we were to take a look at retrieving data using a stored procedure, okay, again, you'd set up a data adapter, passing in the stored procedure name. And this is a stored procedure name. I'm going against the Northwind database because I figure everybody has that pretty much. Okay. Once you call this stored procedure, you're going to notice, if you tried to run this code, you'll notice it's not there. Okay. What I've done is given you this stored procs.sql. You'll need to run this before you run this sample. Okay, and I've got all the stored procedures created here that I use in this demo. Because Northwind doesn't have any stored procedures. As I think Ken mentioned, that one was adapted from Access, right? Anybody remember that? That kind of lame. I'm going against the Northwind database because I figure everybody has it. Notice if you tried to run this code, you'll notice it's not there. Okay? What I've done is given you this stored procs.sql. You'll need to run this before you run this sample. Okay, and I've got all the stored procedures created here that I use in this demo. Because Northwind doesn't have any stored procedures. As I think Ken mentioned, that one was adapted from Access, right? Anybody remember that? That kind of lame database thing that was out there for a while? All right. So, pretty, not too bad, right? To be able to go against a stored procedure. Okay, but they also can do the same thing using the SQL Helper. Again, not a lot of difference in the code here. All right, so updating data now. Okay, many different ways you can update a stored procedure, right? This is one method. I got a couple of different ones here, where you can say stored procedure name and then pass in positionally to the stored procedure however many parameters you have. It's up to you to make sure you get the data types right and whether you include them in single quotes or not. And if you got a single quote in there, you got to take care of making sure you put in 2 single quotes and all of that BS that you got to do. All right. So we'll do this way. Build a command object, set the connection, open the connection, set the command type, okay, and finally do the execute non-query. Close the connection on that command object. Okay, and we've affected a row. All right. Using the SQL helper. Okay. Again, a little simpler. Now this one is a little weird because you're thinking, now wait a minute, how many parameters am I going to pass to this stored procedure? Did they create, an execute non-query method with just like, 50 parameters out there? No, they use what's called a param array here, don't they? Okay. So the first parameter is the connection string. The second one is the name of your stored procedures. Then you can simply have as many parameters as you need for that particular stored procedure. That is just a param array. I mean, we've had param arrays since when? I don't know. God, they came out we had those in VB3, didn't we? So anyway, it allows you to just specify how many parameters you want. Okay, pretty simple. So again, we've cut down the amount of code that we have to write quite a bit. Okay, cool. All right, now if you are one of the parameter type people, hey, you know what, I really want some better control over my parameters. Okay, I want to be able to set up my own SQL parameters and specify whether it's an input or an output type. Okay, well for that, let's go and take a look at the ADO.NET version of this. So in this case, I've got the same stored procedure name, proc products update. I'm going to build a new command object. Hit the right keys here. Build a new connection object. Okay, and now I'm going to create my own SQL parameters. So I'm going to create a new SQL client.SQL parameter, passing in the name of the parameter that's in my stored procedure, and then the value. That gives me back a param object. Then I add that param object to the parameters collection of my command object. Now this is one of the nice things. If you were real familiar with ADO before, this didn't change very much, did it? From ADO to ADO.NET. This was very similar to what we had before. Okay? Same thing. Open the connection, set the command type, do an execute non-query, close the connection, and boom, you're all done. Okay, let's take a look at the SQL helper. Okay? Now in the SQL helper, what they want you to do is they want us to give them an array of SQL parameters. So in this case, I'm going to dim an array here of 2 elements, and I'm going to create the first element as a new SQL client parameter, right? Same thing. The second element I'm going to create as another SQL parameter. Then we're going to go ahead and call our execute non-query on the SQL helper, and we're going to pass in the connection string, tell it that it's a stored procedure, give it the stored procedure name, and then give it the array of parameters. And it'll take care of the rest. Okay? They actually then loop through this array and actually build the command object themselves, right? And do add to the parameters collection on that command object. Then they do the execute non-query. Okay. All right, so it's just trying to help us cut down a little bit about the total amount of code that we have to write. Output parameters, you're saying, hey, Paul, I got output parameters. Can you deal with those? Absolutely, because we're going to do it exactly the same way. We're going to build an array of parameters here. All right, we're going to build a new parameter, but then we're going to go ahead and set, like for instance, on this, this parameter for this stored procedure that I'm going to call right here, proc ticket create. Okay, I'm saying that, hey, I got a unique identifier, right, a GUID data type. All right, and that GUID data type I want to get back out. Okay, so this stored procedure is actually going to generate a new GUID for me and put it into the output parameter. So all I have to do is set the direction on this parameter, okay, to be parameter direction.output. Again, call your execute non-query just like you're used to doing, passing in your array of parameters, and then at the very end, you can spit that parameter back out. Because all of this is passed by reference down to the execute helper, so that they're going to give you the data back. And there you go, you can see your new GUID got generated. Isn't that GUID? Oh, I know. Questions on that one? Not too bad, huh? Transactions, can we do, oh, sorry, go ahead. Okay, the question is, if I had a huge data set coming back, would I have to loop through the entire data set to get this parameter? Well, this is on the parameters collection, not on a data set, right? Okay, a parameter list is different from your output, okay, the data set you're getting back. The data set would be like the return result you're getting back. This is the parameter that went in. So you just hit the parameters collection to get this back. Okay, has nothing to do with the result set that you're getting back. Because that's another possibility. Here I think I was just doing some sort of update or something. Okay, but you could have a stored procedure that you pass in input parameters. It returns something to you as a result set, but you also might get some output parameters back, right? That does happen. Okay. How do we handle transactions? All right. At some point, you're going to have to insert, or update 2 different rows, maybe in 2 different tables, whatever. And you want to get a transaction going, don't you? So, is there support for that? Absolutely. First off, again, just kind of a little refresher here. Okay. Actually, for some of this might be new to some of you out there. Okay. In this case, we're going to build a command object. Okay. Do the same type of stuff here. Build a new connection, open the connection. Then what we do is on the connection object, we have what's called a begin transaction method. When you invoke the begin transaction method, it returns to you a transaction object. Okay, so I dimmed tr up here as a SQL client.SQL transaction. Then I say, okay, I got that transaction. Let's give that transaction to the transaction property of our command object. That tells the command object that, hey, when you submit this, you're a part of a transaction. Okay, so basically what it's doing is doing a begin trans down there on SQL Server, isn't it? Okay. So my first thing I'm going to do is build an update statement here, fill in my command object with that update statement, fill in the command type, and then do an execute non-query. And that gives me back a number of rows affected. Then what I'm going to do is build another SQL statement here, update categories, set the category name equal to whatever. So this is a different table. I'm going to reuse the same command object. Why not, right? I don't need to have 2 separate command objects. This one already has the transaction set. Let's go ahead and do that guy. Now in this case, both of those statements succeeded. Since they both succeeded, I can go ahead and do a commit on that transaction. Once I've done the commit, go ahead and close the connection. Okay. Any questions on that so far? That makes pretty good sense? Okay. If there was an error, obviously it would have jumped to our catch block here. We would have caught the exception. And the first thing I would have wanted to do is roll back that transaction. Okay. And then again, close the connection. By the way, for you Oracle people, there is a bug in the Oracle driver. It's been pretty well documented. And even for the SQL Server folks, you might as well just do this. But what you should always do is after you close the connection, dispose of it as well. Okay? Because they are making calls out to some unmanaged code, okay, on the Oracle side. It doesn't hurt anything on the SQL Server side, okay? That's a native provider that we're using. But if you were to write this code yourself and you're using Oracle, make sure you do that. Otherwise, you will eventually, if you're on a website and it's building up all this stuff, eventually you're going to get an eFail error. All right, that is what you get. You get a real nice eFail, very explicit error message. Okay? So just a little tip for you there. Took us about half a day to find that, too. Oh. Dave.